Right, I'm here as a board member of GAPS, which is a small organisation based in London for gender action for peace and security, mainly looking at working through 1325, keeping the UK to some account for it, or trying to, and actually trying to do a bit of training work, particularly in Afghanistan at present, to get women into, particularly into government and into levels where they are in the decision-making process, and unless they get training for that. So I suppose in a way I'm hoping that some of that work might get done to help you ultimately in your country, Salome, because at the end of the day we don't have women in places of influence and making decisions, particularly in government. I think the lack of international outrage will continue, and we need to have them at the UN as well. So I really hope that some of the work that the consortium is doing will lead towards that, and I admire Mary very much, obviously, for what she's doing. My specific question is to you, Salome, and it's really because with my eyesight is okay, your colleague who's working for SARCAF was in fact working at a typewriter, and you talked about the lack of facilities to try to keep statistics, which are the most powerful, speaking as an old statistician way back, thing that we need to have to influence. And I just wondered, on her shoulder it said there was a red umbrella fund, and I wondered if, as one practical step, that those of us who are here, if that exists and if there's a way of supporting that, can you let us tell us a little bit more about it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So the lady that we saw there, she's not SARCAF partners or members, but she's the colonel of the army in Bukavu. So she's working for she's a police colonel in the army. So she just be in touch with many organizations because she's the one she's working very hard on gender-based violence at the community level. She have a small vehicle, and then she's traveling in all areas just to see what is happening, and then to really try to push so people they can report the case on the court. So for us, when we met these ladies, it was, she's the famous ladies in the country. So when we are working on gender violence, we need to be in contact with Madame Honorine Tenda. She was in Bukavu in July this year. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the lack of resource that Madame Honorine told you, because it's better to hear a little bit from her. She can explain what she heard about Madame Honorine. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I actually took that photo, and the purpose for that photo was exactly that, to just demonstrate the fact that, in a country such as that, where, gender-based violence, sexual violence is, hugely pervasive in all parts of the country. And, the need for data is critically important, particularly sex disaggregated data is critically important, but unfortunately there's absence of it. And one of the barriers, and huge barriers to that, is the fact that they don't actually have the basic essential service, related to that, which is a laptop or a computer. The lady that we saw is a colonel. She's actually head of the sexual violence unit in the main police unit in the whole of Bukavu. But that's the resource that she only has in terms of capturing the data that is required for it. I took many more photos, in fact, even to be able to demonstrate the office that she works from. And also, even as you arrive at the office, there's so many women that are lined up to report their cases, and that's the only resource that she has to be able to document that. And I think that's one of the critical challenges that the service providers and people like SACAF and Salome that are in country, that they actually have to grapple with every day in terms of having data that would be able to prove to policymakers that actually sexual violence is a critical challenge for everybody there. So that's why I took that photo.
Yeah.
Again, and just the one specific question, is there the Red Umbrella Fund, is that a fund, or are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that, but one thing that she just said to me was, the critical lack of resources in terms of funding, but also things like a laptop and a computer for them to be able to do what they want, and also to reach out to the communities to support the women that are survivors for sexual violence.
Again, I think that the data is very important in our work because it also helps us to do the advocacy work. The reporting, we can neglect the reporting, but it's very important to have this kind of report. For example, we have one communities in Minova. They use SMS, text message. When there is a rape situation, they just send to us the text message, and then us directly, we send it to the MONUSCO, it is the UN commander. So this text message help really to reduce the case of sexual violence on these communities. So again, data is very important. Having data, yes, is good, but how we can use this data to link with our advocacy message to help really communities who are affected in this community. So that will focus. But the umbrella one, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll go and find out about the umbrella, and then I can send the information to you. Yeah.
The other challenge in terms of raising awareness around sexual violence is that people actually that are working on the service, I remember talking to Dr. Mkwege, who is one of the most amazing people that is working to support women that are survivors of sexual violence, is that there's huge amount of fear, of service providers as well as the women survivors around talking about it, because they feel that the perpetrators of the sexual violence are within the community. They don't know who it is, and they don't know who they're related to, because they're all over in the wider community. So we always make sure through SACAF and through Christian Aid, each time that we get a moment, an opportunity to speak out, we do speak out on their behalf, because they experience this all the time, but there's huge amount of fear to speak out about it because of fear of retribution and fear of being re-victimized. As you know, Dr. Mkwege, last year in November, he was actually kidnapped, and eventually his driver was killed as part of that kidnapping because he'd spoken out at UN level. So I think as much as we can, when we go out to those spaces, let us bring the information and all the stuff that we hear, just as Devla has done, to speak out on behalf of those people, because it's usually very difficult for them to bring out the information. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lady just behind, two behind, and then there's somebody over here.
Hi, this is more a comment than a question. My name is Sheila Ahern. I work as a researcher mainly in television, and I only recently met Dervla, but I was hugely impressed by that film and very moved. The two main things: one, it's bearing witness. It's what the earlier speaker was mentioning about going out and seeing what's happening, and also giving voice to the people who are directly affected by this. And I think it's something, when you say, a picture can tell 1,000 words so quickly, that 10, 15-minute film really brought it to, I think, probably everybody in the room, exactly what we're all talking about here. And the consortium should, at every opportunity, support films such as Dervla's and others to promote and raise awareness. So it's more a comment. Thanks.
There's a lady over here in purple who's been waiting. Just on that, I mean, I think your point is very well made, and it's great to think that everybody in the Irish Army is now going to get that as part of it. So well, they sure are. That's the sort of links that are invaluable.
Hi, my name is Marianne Morrissey. I'm representing Irish Girl Guides here today, and I just wanted to just make a comment because I visited Rwanda with the Girl Guides in May, and they've launched a new global action campaign, Stop the Violence, Speak Out for Girls' Rights. And while we were over there, we were there for a week. It was very intensive, and we visited a small village, which it's 19 years since the genocide, and you can see the benefit of programs, women's programs, raising awareness, education, speak out, but the most important thing is partnership, joining up with other organizations. So we've actually launched a non-formal education curriculum around gender-based violence and gender inequality, and just the army thing as well, it kind of feels like when you're in guiding, it kind of feels like an army because there's 10 million worldwide, but it's women only, so it goes right from the top to the bottom and from the bottom up as well. So, I went to the international, I'm bringing it back to my national organisation. We're starting to train our leaders, and they'll, introduce the curriculum to our girls. So we have 13,000 members. And, there was 48 countries worldwide that participated that week, and that's an ongoing training, so, and the power of uniform as well. I know that was a big problem in Rwanda. They didn't trust the military because they felt they were to blame for the genocide. But when you put on, your neckerchief, I couldn't find mine today, I was in a rush. But when you wear that, it's that sense of belonging. You belong to an organisation, and I think for women that's very important because, well, for me, it's a girl space. You know what everybody has the same ideals, the same vision, which is confidence, instilling confidence in young girls and stuff. But it's just the power of your brand and your uniform as well, So I just wanted to make that comment, and the presentations were fantastic, and Dervla, your video was amazing. So thank you.
Just before we go to the next speaker, Jane has a quick comment on that.
Yeah, just on that one about uniform, it's funny. When I've been serving overseas, most of the militaries tend to be even worse than the Irish military in terms of percentage of women, and it's being able to stand up in uniform and say something about women's issues, about gender. I think it's very, very powerful. It's powerful knowing that I have the uniform behind me, and sometimes I feel that men do listen to you more because I'm wearing a uniform than if I weren't wearing the uniform. So I think it's great that for me it's an empowerment tool, and it means that, it's men. Men are more used to dealing with military than they are used to dealing with women. So I tend to use that as much as I can, actually. So yeah, and it's great to hear it articulated.
Thanks, Sarah.
Hi, Anita Friel from Oxfam. I actually have a question, but if I can, I also want to thank sincerely the speakers for a very impressive presentation. I think Dervla and Salome, your work is very, very important, and Jane, we've decided here you should run for president the next time. We'll all support you. Oh, she can. Well, she should leave then, unfortunately. But and I must say, as an Irish citizen, I stand proud here to see, what our artists can do, what our NGOs can do, but then also what our defense forces can do. As a practitioner, of course, this is a source of inspiration for us to carry on, because of course the subject is very very difficult. Now the question is the topic of the title, I suppose, of the event was empowering survivors to influence prevention and response. So the question is for all three of you: how do you think? How do you go about in your work to bring the survivor's voice, and to influence, your own work, and how do you think, that can you do more, whether it's, in filmmaking or, documentary making, or at the defense forces or in the NGO work?
That's a very nice and very easy question. And can I hold it for just a minute and to let it be the last question? But there is somebody still waiting, who's been waiting a while. Gentleman at the very back. We're running out of time. We're beyond time, actually, but that means we're running out of it.
I'll be quick.
So we'll come back to that.
Alan O'Neill is my name, from the Men's Development Network. Very moving presentations this morning. Particularly moved by what the Army are doing and what Command and Lawler presented. It's just in a 94% male environment is just historic what's happening. I'd say the same to Colonel Barber, absolutely fantastic. And to say that the Defence Forces also sent a representative of the Chief of Staff to the White Ribbon event just down the road here. Dawson Street seems to be the centre of this week, and we're really proud again to see Captain Sean Coffey there. Just want to say, and it's hard to say in the face of your brilliant film, Dervla, is that men are good, and something has to happen to those Congolese men to make them into rapists. Something terrible has to happen to them as boys. The information they're given, how they're treated, the conditioning they get, the socialization. Men have to be brutalized to turn out like that. So it's really, really important that boys are worked with in the Congo and everywhere in the world, and in Ireland. And that's what the White Ribbon campaign, sorry for being moved with this, but it has affected me.
Can I say something, actually? Because I'd like to have mentioned this earlier. There's a really good local NGO in Congo called Congo Men's Network, and they're the people I worked with. I accessed all of the perpetrators through them, and they educate men around gender-based violence. And they're a very small NGO. They've very, very little funding, but they're in all of the red zones. They're from the regions, and the work they're doing is incredible. And they were in those military camps, which are really dangerous areas, educating men around gender-based violence. And the whole reason behind making that film was to talk to the men and to look at what's happened to these boys and men, that they can carry out this violence. So for me, education is the way forward. Both men and women need to be educated.
Absolutely, and I'm delighted you mentioned them, because they just emailed us a couple of weeks ago to see how we could build up a partnership around this work. So that's fantastic. The other thing to say, just to my friend from the Congo here, about the criminal aspect of this. Men being violent is criminal. It's criminal in Ireland, it's criminal in the Congo, it's criminal in all the other places you mentioned. The reality is that the criminal justice system is overloaded, and in Ireland, men who commit gender-based violence, about 2% of them will end up in the court, and not all of them will be punished. So we've got 98% of the men who commit that crime will never get to the court. What we have to do is work with those men to try and change their behaviour. We have a MEND program, Men Ending Domestic Abuse. We get about 50 or 60 men into that every year. We get most of them change their behaviour because we work a parallel support system for the women that they're violent to, and those women report back to us whether they change or not. But it's very, very slow work. But just to say, that work has to be done as well with the men who use violence against women. Thanks very much. It was a fantastic.
Thanks very much, Alan. Can we make this the absolute final before we go back? Sorry, I know that lady was trying to get in earlier, and thank you for your indulgence.
Sure. My name is Deirdre Healy. I'm from Cambridge Development Studies Centre. It's a comment and a concern, and I'd love to hear your feedback about this as well, obviously the panel. I've noticed increasingly that medical language is being used to describe gender-based violence, and its increase. Time and again you hear the words epidemic, pandemic, to describe levels of GBV. And I totally disagree with this terminology, and I think it's actually dangerous. I agree with the last speaker that men have to be brutalised, and I was, I think we were all, can be as equally heartbroken for the men that are conditioned and socialised into this behaviour nearly as for the women. Of course, my own personal concern is with the women. But I'm just very aware of this. GBV is not contagious. It is, you do not sit beside someone and because of a sneeze or because of anything else, pick up that behaviour. And unless we define it in social terms and even in cultural terms, but mostly in social terms, particularly within conflict situations, and get away from medical descriptions, I think we're in serious trouble. And I'd love to hear, because I've seen it come from UN agencies, from many NGOs, and I'm very concerned about that.
Am I right in thinking your concern is that it somehow legitimises it? In that?
Yes, and it takes away responsibility from the perpetrator, I think, as well. Because if you receive a disease from a contagion, you don't have responsibility for that. You've been that's a spread of disease that's beyond your control. Okay. But if we use this language, I think it takes away responsibility from the perpetrator.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to you because you're going to rephrase your final question to all three as well. Yeah? Yeah.
Okay. I think, first of all, epidemic, there might be lots of people here who can explain, but the epidemic and pandemics are not necessarily used just for infection diseases, it's used for any kind of disease. And we use the term epidemic in medicine to show that we have a surge, if you like, an increase out of ordinary. And pandemic is actually then when this, epidemic has actually lasted for so long and it's become chronic, and that's why, and it's pandemic. So I think I can see your point, but that's where those who are calling, those who are using those words, epidemic and pandemic, are coming from. It's not because it's contagious, because it's not used. We say epidemic of diabetes, or epidemic of obesity. Pandemic of obesity. This is the reason those terms are used, I think, is to highlight for people who probably relate more to those terms that it is, a huge surge, and it's out of the ordinary, and it needs action. You have sort of, there are organizations like the WHO who only kind of act when you have an epidemic or a pandemic. But, I mean, I agree, and I take your point, just to make a clarification what the terms mean, really.
Okay, I hope the two of you may talk later. But I'm conscious of the clock, and very quickly I'm going to ask each of the three panelists to answer the question, what can they do now in their own specific area to further this? I mean, I don't know what you can do, follow that.
Well, actually, I'm working on a feature documentary. For me, my work has only just started in the Congo, and I want to make a longer film and spend more time out there. I'm also editing at the moment, just finishing another film around impunity and lack of justice, which is, I think, I mean, I've used that word epidemic myself, but I think the lack of justice and the ongoing impunity is a reason why the rape has become so widespread. And I've had men tell me that, well, they saw the rebels raping, so they started raping as well. So for me, I'm completely committed to what's happening in the Congo. It's very close to my heart, and I'll continue to hopefully go back as soon as I can to continue doing more work.
Okay. I think from the Defence Forces point of view, often in times of conflict, we tend to be one of the first in. So I think our main role, to be honest, is to create a safe haven, to try and protect the peace, to allow a situation where NGOs and civil organisations, civil society can get in to give the required help to the survivors. It's not something we would specialise in. However, that's not to say that where we have staff who are qualified, like our medics in particular, that they wouldn't be available, because they would. But I think it's not an area that we get into, but I do think our role within the greater picture is to create a stable environment and a stable society that allows NGOs and other people who are experts in this field to do their job safely.